The river was no place for a soul on that bitter night. Winter had carved its cruelty deep into the land, leaving the valley brittle and hostile, its frozen silence broken only by the groan of ice shifting under its own weight. Snow lay heavy upon the banks, glistening beneath a reluctant moon, and the current beneath the ice whispered like a warning in the dark. Yet in that place of deathly cold, a sudden cry tore through the night, sharp, desperate, human. Jonah Hale, a rancher who had lived half his life with no one to hear him speak, stopped his horse at the sound. He was weary from a day of chopping frozen wood, his body aching and his hands cracked from endless labor. He had no reason to pause, no business with the world beyond the boundaries of his land. But the cry came again, sharper now, tangled with the frantic thrash of something breaking through ice. He dismounted without thought. The horse snorted against the cold, steam rising from its nostrils as Jonah ran toward the river's edge. There, in the moonlight, a small figure flailed desperately in the black water, the ice broken open in jagged circles around her. A girl young, no more than 12, her arms striking weakly at the current, her mouth gasping against the crushing cold. Jonah didn't hesitate. He shed his coat, tossed his gloves aside, and stepped onto the brittle ice. It screamed beneath his boots, cracking outward in spiderwebs as he threw himself forward. The cold stabbed at him as he plunged in, his body seized by the shock of it. But his hand found her arm, her fingers slipping and clawing like the talons of a dying bird. With one guttural cry, he hauled her toward the bank, dragging both their bodies across the ice until they collapsed in the snow. The girl shivered violently, her lips blue, her breath shallow. Jonah pressed his coat around her, his rough hands clumsy as he tried to kindle some spark of warmth. "Stay with me," he muttered, though he hadn't spoken words to another soul in weeks. "Stay." Her eyes fluttered open, wide and frightened, but alive. By the time Jonah lifted her onto his horse and rode back toward his ranch, the stars had dulled behind a veil of storm clouds. Snow began to fall again, sharp as shards of glass, coating the land in yet another layer of silence. His ranch was not much more than a patchwork of boards and grit, battered by years of wind and loneliness. The fences leaned, the barn sagged, and the house, if it could be called that, groaned with every gust that tore across the plains. But it was shelter, and in that moment, it was enough. Jonah carried the girl inside and laid her near the fire, feeding the flames with what little wood he had left. She coughed, weak and trembling, her hair dripping onto the rough wooden floor. Her clothes were threadbare, not nearly enough for such a night. "Where's your kin?" Jonah asked gruffly, crouching beside her. She only stared at him, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. Fear radiated from her as though silence was the only weapon she had. Jonah recognized it. He had worn that same silence once. With a sigh, he fetched a wool blanket and wrapped it around her small frame. He had no children of his own, no family to speak of, and little experience with gentleness. Yet something in the girl's trembling broke open a place inside him he had long believed frozen shut. For hours, he fed the fire, kept her warm, and listened to the stormclaw at the walls of the house. The night stretched endless, and though he did not know her name, he knew one thing with certainty. Had he not heard her cry, she would have been claimed by the river's black current. When morning came, the storm relented. The light of dawn fell pale and thin over the snow. Jonah found the girl sitting by the window, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes scanning the horizon as though expecting something or someone to appear. "You got a name?" Jonah asked, setting a pot of coffee on the stove. After a long silence, her voice broke through, soft and brittle. "Clara." Jonah nodded. "Clara?" he repeated, as though grounding her existence in the air between them. She wouldn't tell him more. Not where she had come from, not why she had been near the river. She held her secrets tight, like a creature cornered. Jonah didn't press. He understood the weight of untold stories. But as the hours passed, a new unease began to stir in him. Tracks in the snow, he noticed them when he went outside to split wood. Not just his own, not the horses'. Other footprints, scattered and deliberate, circling too close to the property. He'd lived long enough on the edge of solitude to recognize when he was being watched. That night, The girl slept by the fire, her breathing steady at last. Jonah sat in his chair, rifle across his knees, staring into the darkness beyond the window. Out there, something stirred, a presence he could not yet name. The first fire appeared at dusk the next evening. Jonah saw it flicker against the horizon, a small flame, too controlled to be a wildfire, too distant to be from his own chimney. Then another, and another. By the time the sun sank, half a dozen fires burned in a wide circle around his property, glowing like sentinels against the snow. Jonah's gut tightened. He reached for his rifle, every nerve taut. But then came the sound, the crackle of wood, the low murmur of voices carried on the wind. Not hostile shouts, not threats. Used voices. Clara stirred, rubbing her eyes. "What is it?" she whispered. Jonah kept his gaze on the horizon. "People." "Bad people?" He didn't answer. He wasn't sure. But deep down, he sensed this was no accident. Whoever they were, they knew of his ranch, knew of the girl, knew of him. The circle of fires wasn't meant to frighten, it was meant to announce. And Jonah Hale, a man who had lived most of his life unseen, was about to be pulled into the light. Jonah didn't sleep that night. The fires on the horizon burned steady, unmoving, their glow spilling over the snow like watchful eyes. Each flame marked a presence, and though the voices carried faintly across the frozen land, none came closer. It was not an attack. Not yet. It was something else, something patient. By dawn, the fires had gone out, but the unease remained. Clara noticed his tension as he stepped outside to feed the livestock. She lingered in the doorway, wrapped in the wool blanket, her small frame dwarfed by the empty stillness of the plains. "They're watching us," she said quietly. Jonah paused, the feed bucket heavy in his hands. Her words were not a question, they were a certainty. "You know them?" he asked. Clara hesitated, chewing her lip, eyes darting toward the horizon. Finally, she whispered, "They're my people." Jonah set the bucket down slowly. "Your kin?" She shook her head. "Not kin. Tribe. We don't use words like yours, but they're mine." Her voice cracked, as though the admission cost her. "They saw you bring me from the river." Jonah narrowed his eyes. "And now they're sitting out there with fires, staring at my land?" Clara hugged the blanket tighter. "It's their way. They don't walk into a man's house uninvited. They wait. They show they are near. They wait for you to decide if you'll meet them." The words rolled heavy in Jonah's mind. He had lived his life fending off intrusions, land thieves, ranch wars, men who'd kill for water rights. Never once had anyone waited for his choice. By afternoon, the fires returned, rekindled in a careful ring. Jonah saddled his horse, his rifle slung across his back. Clara begged him not to go, but he only said, "If they're yours, then we best make this clear." The snow crunched under hoof as he rode toward the nearest fire. Shapes emerged from the whiteness, figures cloaked in furs, their faces shadowed by the hoods of winter. They stood tall and silent, not raising weapons, not stepping back. At their center was an elder, his hair braided with streaks of gray, his eyes sharp as flint. He raised his hand in quiet greeting. "You are Hale," the elder said, his voice measured, accented by the rhythm of a language older than Jonah's land. "The one who pulled Clara from the river." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I reckon I am." The elder nodded once. "She is ours, but she is alive because of you. That debt does not fade with the snow." Jonah studied them warily. He expected demands return her, leave this land, surrender something. Instead, the elder's words carried no edge of threat, only weight. "She said you were hers," Jonah muttered, eyeing Clara's blanket still wrapped around her at his ranch in his memory. "I didn't know what she meant." "She is of us," the elder replied, "but she wandered too far. She nearly gave herself to the river. You reached in where we could not. For that, you carry her story now and ours." Jonah shifted in the saddle. "I don't need anyone's story but my own." The elder's gaze didn't falter. "The river disagrees." For days the fires remained. The tribe never trespassed on Jonah's land, never crossed his fence line, yet always circled it with quiet flames that lit the night. Clara grew restless, caught between relief and fear. She spent hours at the window, whispering words Jonah didn't understand. Old prayers, or maybe fragments of songs. Jonah tried to focus on his work, the mending of fences, the chopping of wood, the endless battle to keep the ranch alive, but every swing of the axe was haunted by the glow on the horizon. He had saved a girl, and in return, the world had come closer than it ever had before. One evening, Clara finally spoke what Jonah had sensed but left unasked. "They're waiting for you to choose," she said. "To either accept their watch or send them away." Jonah frowned. "Send them away? And if I do?" "They'll leave," Clara whispered. "But the debt between you will turn to shadow. They will say you cast them off. They will not harm you, but they will not help you either." Jonah scoffed. "Help me? Ain't no one ever helped me?" But even as the words left his mouth, he felt their hollowness. He had carried loneliness like a badge, convinced it was safer than trust. Yet when Clara's small voice answered, "They will, if you let them," he realized the fires were not threats. They were promises. The breaking point came 3 nights later. A rider came out of the dark, not from the tribe's circle, but from town. A man Jonah knew by sight, one of the ranchers who had long eyed his land with envy. His horse kicked up snow as he stopped at Jonah's gate, a pistol glinting at his side. "You've got company," the man sneered, nodding toward the distant fires. "Heard tell you're making friends with the people out there." Jonah kept his hand steady on the rifle resting by the porch. "Ain't your concern." "Oh, it's my concern." The man shot back. "Word is, their kind's been roaming closer. Folks in town don't like it. Don't like that you're cozying up neither. Might be we decide you're a problem, Hale. Might be we solve it ourselves." With that, he spat into the snow and rode off, leaving a trail of malice behind him. Clara appeared beside Jonah, her eyes wide with fear. "They'll come," she whispered. "They'll come for your land." Jonah clenched his jaw, staring into the night. He knew she was right. For years, other ranchers had waited for him to falter, for his fences to fail, for the land to slip from his grip. Now they had reason enough to strike. But as the fires burned steady around his ranch, he felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he was not entirely alone. The next morning, Jonah rode out again, this time with Clara clinging to his saddle. The tribe met them at the fires, their faces calm, expectant. The elder stepped forward, his breath clouding in the cold. "The choice stands, Hale. Do you ride alone, or do you let our fire join yours?" Jonah looked at Clara, her small hands clutching his coat, her eyes pleading. Then he looked at the horizon, where the threat of rival ranchers lingered like storm clouds. He took a long breath, his voice low but certain. "If I let you in, there ain't no turning back." The elder nodded. "That is the way of fire. Once lit, it burns. But it also warms, and it also defends." Jonah's silence stretched, the weight of years of solitude pressing hard against him. But at last he gave a single nod. "Then light your fires closer." The elder's eyes gleamed with quiet approval. Behind him, the tribe began to move, carrying torches toward Jonah's land not as invaders, but as guardians. For the first time in his life, Jonah Hale felt the walls of his solitude bend beneath the warmth of something greater. And though he did not yet know it, the choice he made that morning would decide not just the fate of his ranch, but the battle that was coming for it. The days that followed felt like the breath before a storm. Jonah's ranch, once a quiet and lonesome patch of land, now pulsed with movement. The tribe lit their fires closer, as promised, their smoke curling into the cold air alongside Jonah's own chimney. They did not cross his fences without permission, but their presence was undeniable. At night, their voices rose in songs that Clara translated in hushed tones, songs of watchfulness, of guardianship, of debts honored in firelight. Jonah moved through his chores with a strange new awareness. Where once he had swung his axe into the wood with no sound but the echo across the valley, now he glanced up to see figures watching, quiet and steady. They were not there to spy or intrude. They were there to ensure nothing came upon him unawares. Yet the peace was fragile. Jonah knew it, Clara knew it, and the elder knew it most of all. It was Clara who saw the first signs. She burst into the barn one afternoon, her breath ragged, her cheeks red from the cold. "They're coming," she gasped. Jonah straightened from the hay he was pitching. "Who's coming?" She pointed to the ridge. There, on the snowy crest, black dots appeared, horses, riders, too many to mistake for a casual visit. Jonah's stomach sank. Rival ranchers. Men who had long eyed his land, now emboldened by whispers that he had thrown in with outsiders. They would not come to parley. They would come to claim. Jonah's first instinct was the old one: grab the rifle, brace the door, fight alone. But Clara's small hand clutched his sleeve, and when he looked into her eyes, he saw no fear of the tribe beyond his fence. Instead, he saw trust. Trust that the fires burning there would not let him fall. By the time the riders reached the edge of his property, the tribe was already in motion. Men with bows moved like shadows along the tree line. Women carried bundles of wood to build new fires, signals and shields, all at once. Even the children carried water to quench flames if needed. Jonah stood on his porch, rifle in hand, as the riders fanned out before him. Their leader, the same rancher who had spat in his snow, stepped forward. His horse snorted clouds into the air as he shouted, "Hail! You've brought trouble to these parts. Thought you could hide behind strangers, but this land was never meant for you. Hand it over now, and maybe we'll leave you standing." Jonah lifted his rifle slowly, steady as the cold itself. "This land's mine, always has been, and I don't hide behind anyone, but if you aim to take it—" He paused, the sound of crackling fire swelling behind him. "You'll find you ain't just fighting me." As if on cue, flames rose along the fence line. The tribe lifted their torches in unison, their silhouettes steady against the glow. Dozens of eyes fixed on the riders, calm yet resolute. The rival rancher shifted uneasily in his saddle, his earlier confidence wavering. "So this is how it stands? You choose them?" Jonah's voice carried across the frozen air. "I stand with those who value life, who keep watch when they could have turned away. I stand with those who respect what is not theirs to claim." He raised the rifle slightly. "So you'd best ride on." For a moment, silence covered the valley. Then the rancher pressed his horse forward, his men following close behind. The snow shuddered under pounding hooves, the tension ready to break. The tribe moved together. Arrows streaked through the air, landing before the charging horses, startling them and forcing the riders to slow. Shouts rose as they reined back, unsettled. Jonah fired not to harm, but to strike a tree trunk beside the lead rider. The echo thundered across the land. The meaning was unmistakable. This was no place to trespass. Yet a few advanced still, their presence testing the line. Jonah steadied himself, preparing for the worst, when suddenly a wall of flame rose from the woodpiles the tribe had built. The fire surged high, a barrier of light and heat that forced the riders to veer away. The blaze drove them back, their formation breaking apart. Jonah's pulse raced, but before he could act further, the elder stepped to his side, composed as the falling snow. "They will not pass," the elder said quietly. "Not tonight, not with fire standing guard." The riders circled in frustration, their leader glaring through the haze of smoke and sparks. Yet he saw what Jonah already knew: every path was secured, every approach protected not by one but by many. At last, with a bitter command, the rancher turned his horse and rode away, his men following. Their figures disappeared into the distance, leaving behind only scattered snow and the faint trace of smoke. Stillness returned, broken only by the crackling fire. Clara held Jonah's arm, her wide eyes reflecting relief. "They're gone," she whispered. Jonah lowered his rifle, his chest still heavy with breath. For the first time in years, he had not stood alone. Firelight revealed the faces of those who had chosen to remain at his side. The elder rested a hand on his shoulder. "Now you see," he said softly, "the river gave you Clara, and you gave her life. That bond tied you to us. Tonight the fire made it clear. Alone you may endure, together you prevail." Jonah's gaze swept over the tribe, then to Clara, whose faint smile trembled with relief. The truth he had resisted for so long settled within him. He was never meant to carry everything alone. The fires no longer seemed like barriers. They felt like guardians keeping the cold at bay. In the weeks that followed, the tribe's fires remained. They did not challenge Jonah's independence, nor did they claim his land. Instead, their warmth became part of it, woven into the rhythm of his days. Rival ranchers never returned, deterred by the memory of that night. And Jonah, once defined by solitude, learned the strength of shared trust, the power of flames that did not burn against him, but for him. The river had nearly taken a life. Instead, it had kindled a bond strong enough to reshape the land. Jonah Hale would no longer be remembered as the man who lived apart. He became the man whose ranch was ringed by fire, by guardianship, by loyalty, and by an unspoken unity stronger than any fence. This is not just a story of survival. It's a reminder of what we often forget, that strength does not come from standing alone, but from knowing when to open your gates, when to let others light their fires beside yours. Jonah pulled a girl from the river, and in return, he gained something no storm or enemy could take: family, born not of blood but of choice. And perhaps the lesson for us is the same. That even in the coldest seasons of life, there are fires waiting on the horizon, ready to burn for us, if only we let them closer. If this story moved you, share it, let its fire spread. And remember, sometimes one act of compassion is enough to change the course of an entire life.